I am a poor man. I am a poor man. If I was a rich man, I would probably have a drawing monitor, decent one, like this. But luckily, in this world that we live in, hundreds of sheets of paper, dozens of G-pen nibs, along with the ink and the printer are all free. And that's why I'm doing my comic book, Cloud Catchers, traditionally, analogly. I'm drawing it in analog. And today I'm going to show you how I make a page of my comic book, Cloud Catchers. So, come along, let's go! This is the page we will be working on today. In all of its glory, this is the final result. I think it represents a very good example of an average page in Cloud Catchers. Anyways, let's see how I make it. Now, this is not a universal guide on how I think everyone should make comic books. This is just how I happen to make mine. I've been working on it for quite a while now, and I've learned a couple of tips and tricks, and at this point the workflow is very standardized. In future projects I might do things differently, but right now it is what it is. Let's go! About a year ago I wrote a rough outline / script for the story itself, and then I started drawing it. Wow! Now, drawing starts from here. The name, the blueprint, the thumbnail sketch, the quick roonies, the friend has a lot of names. I make them 8 pages per paper, per one sheet of paper. The main point is to get the general idea of how the panels and the story flow. Just put it out there! If you're unfamiliar with panel flow, let me explain. Basically, in a Western comic, the comic is read from left to right, up to down, left to right, up, down, like that. And you want to guide the reader's eyes along this path, nice and smooth. So you want action to lead to the other panels. You want to be in control of where the reader is looking at and when. Now this excludes all the nerds who actually look at the pictures and appreciate them. This is just for irregular people who are reading it casually, readers. So now that you know what panel flow means, you also realize that an important part of the panel and story flows as well are the speech bubbles and the placements. And by story flow I mean just how the story progresses forwards. The speech bubbles, they are the actual things that people read on the comic book. While they might appreciate the pretty pictures, they are reading the actual bubbles. So the placement of the bubbles is very important, since they work as sort of anchors for the reader's view. Jump from one place to another. They are the ones that guide the reader most. So their placement is very important. That's why I want to start with the placement of speech bubbles, and then I put all the little figures and stuff. I do these name blueprint sketches, thumbnail sketches, as quick as possible so that they are very easy to erase and redraw. I do not put any effort into them, just as long as I myself get the idea. Things would be different if I were to work with someone else, but right now only I need to know what these artifacts, what these hieroglyphs mean. That's also why I make the thumbnail sketches so small, because it's easier to draw bad and quick when you're drawing small. It's almost automatic. As I said, this is where I figure out the general composition of the pages. I don't know if I actually said it. This is where you figure out the panel composition, where everything goes and how the flow goes. I try to put at most, let's say, 6 panels on the page. Sometimes more, usually less. Also, I put only 3 rows of panels. That way the page doesn't get too crowded and the panels are much more clear, especially since I'm working only on A4 size paper, so you don't want to make the panels tiny so that you can't make any sense of what you're drawing. I do not have that much to work with on A4 size. I write the text, the actual text of the comic book on these blueprints as well, on these thumbnail sketches. I like to keep the text space small as well, so that I'm automatically restricted and I have to think about what I say, what I write. I can't just be yapping. I choose my words carefully and every line has its space and meaning. Very poetic. Now, of course, every single thing in these thumbnail sketches, the name may be changed in the actual comic drawing process, but the name, the thumbnails work as an irreplaceable guide for me for when I draw. I don't have to do that much thinking at that point. Now you might be confused why I call it the name sometimes. The name is just the word that the Japanese mangakas use. See? I am a cultured individual. Now, for the actual blueprint, the actual name that we will be working for today. Boom. I have folded it to avoid some spoilers, since we are in the final chapters, but it is the exact same concept as the first one. I usually work 2 pages at least at a time, meaning the spread of pages. That way I can keep in mind the flow and the general idea of the story and the contents. But since I'm streaming this and making a video of this and there's spoilers and stuff, things will be a little different this time. Trust me, that's how I work. And due to those minute differences in the workflow, I also notice it in the end result. But there's no point in getting frustrated about it, right? I also constantly check the surrounding pages, the pages behind and the pages in the front, so that the emotions and everything has to stay consistent in the larger context of the story, man. Anyways, the paper that I am using is good quality, smooth office paper in A4 size, as I previously mentioned. Now, I won't be going too much in depth of my equipment because I have a big plan of making an entirely separate video about all my drawing tools and equipment and such, so stay tuned for that. Like and subscribe! I have drawn margins on the sides with these exact dimensions. So the outer lines are 14 millimeters and 20 millimeters. And the distance from the edge of the paper to the inner margin is 30 millimeters and 38.5 millimeters. I'll be calling them margins. They have some fancy names I do not remember. I think the outer one is called bleed, something like that, and the inner one is the draw area, but I will explain their functions to you. The outer margin indicates where the final page will be cut. Everything that goes beyond that is lost to the void. If you want to make a page that's no panels, just a full page, or a spread for example, you will have to draw over the outer margin as well. That is where the page will be cut. Those are the actual edges of the page. The inner margins indicate what will be clearly visible. Everything inside the inner margins is sure to be shown in the page. Will not be cut out or stuck in some weird crevice between the pages. Since I am doing cloud catchers in a very traditional way, I put my panels basically following these inner margin lines. Sometimes something pops out, sometimes I break the mold a little bit or do some spreads or something, but that's the general idea. Anyways, no matter how you decide to do your paneling and page composition and layout and all those fancy stuffs, I think you should always put your text inside these inner margins so that it will for sure be visible and easy to read. Making reading easy thing, that's the key to make you king. I used to do margins according to the instructions of the late great Akira Toriyama in his book, showcased here, I don't know the English name. His instructions were to put a nail in each of the corners of each of the margins and push it through a stack of paper. That way you have holes in each corners and you can just make a line. That way you can manually do the margins. Now, unfortunately, this was quite an inconsistent method, since if you put the nail down, it might go a little slanted, and the papers on the bottom have a smaller margin than the ones on the top. Obviously, this caused problems with scanning as well, since you're also scanning a hole that you have to clean up later digitally. All sorts of troubles. And that is why at some point I printed these faint yellow lines on the papers as margins, guidelines. The yellow faint color does not show after scanning, especially when I'm turning it black and white. As I said, I draw my panels mostly following the margins. Most of the panels that I use have a 90-degree angle, they're basically squares. But to emphasize some high-tense emotions, action and otherwise high-tense moments, I break the mold to be cool and cold. I think this is pretty typical for any comic book. Magical function of ruler! Number 1. I use the lines of the rulers to get the gaps right. I use the longer lines on the centimeter side for the horizontal gaps between rows of panels, and the smaller lines for the vertical gaps between the panels, as you see right here or here. This speeds up the drawing process a lot, since I do not have to measure every there's a 1 centimeter between this and this. I can just use this, boom. At least for me, I don't know if it's because I'm used to reading comic books, but the thicker line horizontally makes it easier to separate that you're supposed to go from this panel to this panel and then jump the larger gap. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's just how I feel, man. Now there is also another magical function of the ruler that I'll tell you later. Stay tuned for that one. After the panels have been laid out, just like in the thumbnail sketches, I put the speech bubbles next. Note that I am constantly working on the page as a whole and not just an hyper-focused individual panel. Now, I suck at making bubbles. I make angular, star-shaped, pointy bubbles for yelling and regular round bubbles for speaking. I sometimes do some funny variations like a heart-shaped bubble or something, but in general, I definitely need to get a lot better at making speech bubbles. One of my weakest points in making comics. After bubbles, I lay out the rough shapes of all the important stuff, also known as characters. Then I check the flow. I hold the paper and see how it reads, where my eyes go naturally, and I usually hold it next to the other page as well, so that I see the complete flow of the spread. That's very, very, very important. But once again, today we're doing things a little special here. After confirming that everything looks good, everything's placed well, I just get to drawing. Not much to say here. Just draw until it all feels good enough and you have managed to hide all the hands behind the backs or the pockets. I draw most of the stuff at this phase, but some small stuff like the background elements, some of it, and effect lines, I often just draw at the inking phase. This sketching part is for things that need to be precise, but are easy to get wrong. And then it is inking time! While inking, I cover my precious IKEA desk with this green cutting board thing in case of any leakage. I shall now reveal the magical function of ruler numero 2. This perfect heavenly ruler comes with a raised edge. Many people tape coins under a flat ruler for the same effect. Basically, because of the raised edge, the ink doesn't smudge all the way everywhere while sliding the ruler while inking with it. This is a must-have. Always have a ruler with a raised edge if you plan on inking manually. I start inking with the borders. I do the inking with fine liners, 0.5 to be specific. That way I do not have to deal with a dip pen thingy. Now this page, the panels are very easy and simple, straightforward to ink since nothing is popping out anywhere and everything is contained in the panels nice and neatly. Very good. As I said, I won't be going too much into the equipment in this video, but know that I am using a G-pen and Sumi ink for inking. Then I just ink. I am heavy-handed, so I have to be constantly watching my pressure. Look at these tasty sausages. Oh, how I envy thine small hands. My workflow is same as with sketching. I always ink the important things first, and then I go back for the lesser things. After inking everything that is important, it's finally erasing time! Sometimes I do speed lines and such before erasing and sometimes after. Everything just depends on how confident I am feeling on drawing speed lines, for example, without a guide. Speaking of speed lines, I have 2 little tricky treats for you, my friend. You have been so kindly and patiently watching me. Number 1. I use the lines on my cutting board thingy for guides. Number 2. I have a thumbtack. I have a tape. Boom! They fuse into a genius device of magical anchor point for ruler. I use this a lot and you should too. Just be careful you don't poke yourself with it. And a tip for this, you might wanna put the tape under your shirt, for example, a couple of times so that it doesn't stick to the paper too bad and take all the paper with it. And now the last part of inking is changing into a brush. And filling the solid blacks. I don't use any screen tones on cloud catchers because
somebody has been stealing all of the screen tones and they are not available anywhere in Europe, let alone Finland. I cannot for the life of me find them. Who is keeping them all?
Instead, I manually hatch some places for the same effect for mid-tones. If you read early Dragon Ball or One Piece, they don't use basically any screen tones either, so it cannot be too bad. Always remember, kids, you gotta work with what you have. After playing with the ink, going over borders and smudging everything, it's time for final cleanup. Whiteout, or in this case, white markers, fix everything that is wrong. Everywhere where there is ink, where there shouldn't be ink, you just put a little bit of white and boom, vanish. Oxy action. I am a certified idiot, so I clean all the borders and stuff with this as well. If I was a smart berry, I would do it all digitally with snip snap one click, but And after the whiteout, I am done. It may look a tiny bit crude right now in front of me with all the whiteouts, and the ink may not be even and small stuff like that, but trust me, all of it will be fixed after it's scanned and turned into black and white. Everything will be nice and crisp and perfect. I have made my own font on the computer, so after scanning I just do the lettering digitally. And that's just all that's left to do is wash your brush and wipe the G-pen clean with a wet wipe and dry it with a paper towel. Always keep your nib clean. And then all that's left to do is like and subscribe.